What have I got for Ireland? Something which he has wanted these past 700 years. Will anyone be satisfied at the bargain? Will anyone?
The treaty was a great disappointment because we had been working up, as we thought, to an Irish Republic, and the treaty didn't give it to us. Worse than that, the partition, which cut off 6 counties, was, I think, the deciding factor for the Republican side.
Suddenly everybody realised that the 6 counties, the little bit in the north of Ireland was handed over, still held by the British.
Lloyd George had emerged with all he wanted. Northern Ireland was still in the United Kingdom, and the Irish still in the British Empire. The price of the settlement was to be paid in Ireland.
The treaty split the nationalist movement. It split Dáil Éireann, not exactly in halves, but certainly split it fairly disastrously, and led, of course, at a military and political level, and led to civil war.
Such were the passions unleashed by the treaty, that now, in the streets of Dublin, the Irish fought the Irish. Many Irish nationalists felt that under the threat of further war, an independent 26-county Ireland within the Empire was as much as could be reasonably extracted from the British. But for others, it was a betrayal. That a century of republican struggle should have ended with a divided Ireland, giving loyalty to an English king.
By absorbing the energies of the nationalist movement in the 26 counties, in bitter and bloody civil war, it also cut off the nationalists in the 6 counties of Northern Ireland from those in the south, from the community whose hopes and whose aspirations and whose values and political ideas it largely shared.
In the mayhem of the Civil War, the Catholics in Northern Ireland were almost forgotten. Up north, as Protestants celebrated their victory, the Catholics in the province felt betrayed and anxious, fearful of their place in a Protestant state. It was pictured at Lord Londonderry's garden party. But now they faced the problem of governing a country where a substantial minority rejected the settlement and legitimacy of the Northern Ireland state.
Somehow the Ulster Unionists had floated free on the raft of partition. They had got their own 6 counties, they had got their own parliament and their own government. But the problems which were to plague the Northern Ireland government from 1920 onwards, the problem of dealing with a dissident minority which could amount to almost a third, which amounted to almost a third of the total population. The democratic basis of any such state is consensus, and clearly consent was not forthcoming from that minority.
In the border areas around Berleak, the Catholics were in rebellion, and the IRA was fighting an effective guerrilla war. Raids, shootings and kidnappings were almost daily occurrences. In these same areas, nationalist Catholic councils had been elected and had promptly refused to accept the legitimacy of the Belfast government. In the areas with a Catholic majority, shown here in green, there were nationalist councils. Nearly a third of the province's local government was giving allegiance to the Southern Parliament. So civil disobedience and guerrilla war threatened to make the state ungovernable.
The reaction of the Protestants to the rebel councils in 1921-22 was one of fear, I believe, that if the rebel councils that existed at that time, who were openly defying central government, who openly stated that their allegiance was to the Parliament of the South and not to the new Parliament of the North, then the central government and Protestants themselves felt that these people would have to be controlled, that if they got away with what they were attempting to do, that they would destroy the state itself.
When the new state was set up, it was set up against the wishes of the majority of the Irish people, including those who controlled these councils, the nationalists who controlled these councils. they saw no reason to accept the new state. The justification given for setting up the new state was that this was the wish of the people in the northeast of Ireland. But if that was to be the case, if you were to take self-determination in limited areas, well then the people in Tyrone and Fermanagh and in Derry City said they, by a majority, wish to be included in an all-Ireland state. So why should they be brought under this new state?
So with nationalist councils like Londonderry declaring allegiance to the south, the situation in the province grew tense. Earlier rioting in Derry left 18 people dead. 1,500 troops were needed to keep peace in a town of 40,000. 1 soldier for every 27 people. With the Protestants besieged and Catholics aggrieved, there was sectarian violence throughout the province. The worst in Belfast, where a protracted campaign of terror was unleashed on the Catholic community, remembered to this day.
You'd be lying in bed as a kid at night, you'd hear a lorry suddenly coming along the street, and next thing you hear pounding on the door and footsteps inside and hoarse voices and people being trailed out, probably arrested. You didn't know whether they'd been arrested or whether they'd been taken away to be shot by a body that was known as the murder gang at that time.
If someone had been taken by the police or if someone was murdered, well, there would be what we say in Irish, the keening, the women crying. You may have heard the expression. And then if we heard the keening, then we knew that someone had been murdered by the forces.
And I trailed them out of bed, and they shouted down for their mother to come up the stairs, and she went up. And they shot them 5 sons out of cold blood right along, one by one, in the following hour. Shot them dead and wanted her to witness.
And in fact, in the morning paper, your parents would read out some item that somebody had been found in the fields with their hands tied with rosary beads, or a little sign hung around their heads, a spy, or something like that. In fact, my own teacher at St. Paul's School, I remember one weekend on my way to Mass, hearing that he, in fact, had been murdered that weekend.
He used to come down our street every morning, 7 o'clock, whistling with the ladders. So everybody missed Malachy this morning. There was no post. And the next thing we got the paper. Malachy halfpenny. My God, such a death to give that boy. May God forgive the hand that done it. They cut the privates out of him. They tied him to the tree. And then they shot him after he'd done his sufferings.